Hi guys, Evening Central here and welcome back to another video, and today we are going to be reviewing part 3 of the Flux, Once Upon a Time. Now before we get into this video, please consider liking and subscribing as it really does help me out. But yeah, let's get into the video. So, Once Upon a Time, obviously the third part in the trilogy, and we're left on a bit of a cliffhanger, and the reason I'm going to bring it back to we left us on a cliffhanger of Yaz and Vinda about to be killed by the swarm. The reason I put this in is because if you ask me, this whole episode was a bit messy, but it was hinged on the fact that I think Chris Chibnall possibly wrote himself into a bit of a corner. The cliffhanger was good. It made me wonder what was going to happen next week. How was the Doctor going to save Yaz, save Vinda, and get all four of them out, away from the swarm? And I'm not going to lie, it wasn't particularly satisfying how he kind of did it, and it did look like he'd kind of wrote himself into a bit of a situation where he couldn't really do much with the characters. So basically, the Doctor sonics something and sends them all into a time stream. And basically, she's trying to put them into their own time streams while she fixes the fact that time's not flowing properly. And it kind of goes on a bit more, and they kind of all just go through different points. So Yaz goes to see her friends and goes back to her job that we don't really and see much more of. Dan goes back to his dates and stuff like that, and then the Doctor, which I don't understand why they did this, and I'll get to in a second, but the Doctor, she goes into this memory or some place that she doesn't recognise, she's not seen before, and we keep going, and then eventually we realise, hang on, that's Joe Martin's Doctor in the mirror, and obviously at that point well, it's not. It is her memory, it's just she doesn't remember this memory anymore. And the reason I took issue with it wasn't the memory itself, it was the fact that they needed to let everyone else have one. So the way they did it was the Doctor was there as not Joe Martin's Doctor, but as Jodie Whittaker. So the memory was almost a reenactment with the new characters. So, for instance, the Jodie Whittaker's Doctor's memory was a Joe Martin Doctor adventure that we didn't see, because obviously we haven't seen her on screen as an adventure like any of the other Doctors. But the characters, so Carvanista was one of the characters, the dog. He was replaced by Dan, and two of the other characters were replaced by Yaz and Vinda. So rather than the original people who were actually in that situation, they've been replaced by the people that the Doctor recognises. Which I understood why he did that, because it makes sense a little bit, and obviously it ties in with the fact that she was looking for Carvanista and he was part of the whole division thing that they mentioned, and it shows that the Doctor was connected to the Maury a long time before going to the planet called Time. And I thought all that worked well, but then when you add that on top of everything with Vinda and him kind of going to reimagining how he got to the space station, you've got Yaz with her house life and the Weeping Angels chasing her, which I'll get back to mainly in a second, Dan doing whatever Dan does, and then on top of this other girl who's scouting around the universe, basically explaining to us the devastation of the Flux and how the Sontarans, the Daleks and the Cybermen have all been kind of fighting against each other to gain control of what the Flux left behind. You get one 40-ish minute episode which is kind of all over the place, and I'm not a fan of it. So moving on anyway to the next section, not section, but kind of just next part, we'll talk about Yaz and her thing with the Weeping Angels. So the Weeping Angels were in the first episode, but they weren't chasing her, they were chasing another character. and they've decided to just pop into this episode. I'm not really sure what they were doing here. I think because the next episode is I think it's called The Village of the Angels. It's basically the angel episode that they've been teasing for on the trailers and all that. This is the next episode is the angel episode on Sunday, and for some reason they've just kind of like been really teasing it in this episode. So Yaz notices the angels, and then the angel kind of pops out the TV screen, this very Series 5 kind of style with Amy Pond, and then at the end of the episode, the angel just kind of full on comes into the TARDIS and then starts piloting the TARDIS. And the cliffhanger is that the Weeping Angel is piloting the TARDIS. Now, I think I thought possibly the Weeping Angels are trying to mend time, because the Weeping Angels are people that feed off broken time-ish. But maybe they're trying to fix it. Maybe they're trying to put time right, which would be quite interesting to see the Weeping Angels helping the Doctor rather than hindering her a bit. But I doubt that will happen. That will actually happen. It most likely just be another Weeping Angels kind of story. Yeah, it was an unusual thing. We'll see how it plays out in the next episode. But it was unusual to have in. So then finally, we move on to the final part with Vinder. And so for Vinder's like memories and stuff, we saw him just kind of in and out of his like memories with the fact that he saved many people, or he went into some sort of dangerous situation, saved those people. He then kind of went into, he basically spoke to, I think he's called the supremacist, but he was like the big boss of the planet, and he disobeyed him or filed an incident report, and because of that he got stationed on the space shuttle thing that he was on in the first episode. And yeah, I understood why they were trying to show us this, though, because I think, although as it said in the end of the episode, as it clearly showed at the end of the episode, that Vinder was left the TARDIS, he's not a companion like Dan. He just kind of got on and then he left. He's back on his own planet, although it was destroyed. He's trying to find the woman, which I'll get onto in a second. He's clear that he's going to come back in some shape or form, so I clearly can see what they were trying to build his backstory up a bit. But did they need to make it so, like, did they need to really? Not particularly, especially in conjunction with this woman that's in it. They didn't need to have both of those things at the same time. So moving on to the woman, we have this female character who's flying all over the universe trying to find Vinder, because obviously Vinder was on the spaceship when the flux happened, not on the planet. And she travels around, she escapes. You see her at the beginning with the Daleks, in like the Daleks area. She basically kind of like a radio transmission of how bad everything is outside while we're following the Doctor and Yaz and Dan and Vinder. It's basically going there. This is what the flux is doing to everybody outside. It's very Harry Potter. If you've watched the Deathly Hallows Part 1 of Harry Potter, when they're in the kind of tent, they have the radio, which is why I kind of said the radio, because the radio is telling Harry, Ron and Hermione about Snape becoming headmaster, all those other things. That was basically what she was. She was just telling us how bad everything is out while we are focusing on the main characters, while everyone else is happening everywhere else around the world, or in the Doctor's case, the universe. Yeah, she was an okay character. I think she would have worked better if we had the Doctor's memory and then her splitting, like cutting between those two. But I think she needed more character time on screen alongside the Doctor's memory, rather than having Yaz's and Dan's and Vinder's memories as well. It felt a bit overloading. So now the Doctor saves the day by the Maury kind of managing to like bring some more of themselves into the future type with. It was a bit confusing how they've actually managed to do it without creating a paradox, but for argument's sake, just say it worked. And then the basically the swarm guy is like, alright, fair enough, disappears with the passenger, but not until telling Dan that he has Diane in part of the passenger, as we find out in the Doctor's memory that the passengers are basically like prison ships. They're a bit like not the Crucible, basically the Ark thing. I think it's the Ark that the Daleks had in Army of Ghosts and Doomsday. It's basically one of those, because it holds many things, but it's not just Daleks. It's probably a lot of humanoids and stuff like that as well. But yeah, they escape, and then obviously the Doctor kind of goes on to leave, and I assume track them down, but not after one more memory. The Doctor gets one more memory of something that she doesn't see, and it's this old woman. She's speaking to the Doctor, who's about something to do with how the flux was not a natural occurrence, it was man-made, and it was something linked to her. So they've made the flux linked to her, which was an unusual decision. I don't know if I would have taken that direction personally. I think it would have been better, maybe not to make it man-made, but to make it maybe not make it natural, like make it man-made, but not necessarily for her. Maybe somebody tried to make the flux because they foresaw a time where the world was going to be devastated by something, or like some sort of Thanos story where he was trying to do the right thing but at a very big cost type storyline, which would have been good. I know people might have complained that it was too similar to Infinity War, but I think it would have been better rather than linking it back to the Doctor, because we've already had last season where the Doctor's whole backstory's been changed. You don't need to then make the next series her as the epicenter of all the bad things happening. It makes her too important, which is fine because it means it gives her more reason to be in the situation. But I think like Tom Baker's Doctor, especially in stuff, and Sean Pertwee, they just go into situations whether they're supposed to be there or not, and I think making her important is fine, but you don't need to keep making her so important because that's an excuse for her to figure out what's going on. I think if whether the Doctor was the reason the flux happened or not, she'd still go investigate. But overall, I think this episode was a bit messy. I think there's too many parts going in, and as I said in my first review, I was worried that if a 6-episode span would not help it would hinder it because too many things were going on, and I was right. This episode, too many things were going on. At the moment, I'd probably give this episode a 3 out of 10, and I say 3 out of 10 because maybe it's just because you've had a really good 7 and then a really good 8, 7.5, 8 episodes for the past 2, and then you've got this one, and it just so much going on, so messy. And maybe I'll look back on this, maybe when the rest of the other 3 episodes come out, I'll look back on this and be like, oh, that was really smart, they really set up that up well. But at this moment in time, it's just a bit too much going on, and I didn't like it. But yeah, if you have enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing, because it really helps me out. But yeah, see you.